Welcome back to Mark Carney's book club. We are on part 5 of the last chapter of this book, chapter 16, on how Canada can build value for all. And we are tying in the values that have been themes throughout the book into how it affects Canada. We are on sustainability. In the last part, he talked about how our efforts to build sustainability must be in partnership with Indigenous people, and that our approach to sustainability should draw on the wisdom of Indigenous people, and that we have to earn our right to take from the environment while always respecting and nourishing it. And I love this part. It shows that he really does truly value the Indigenous people and does care about reconciliation and making things right for his ancestors, my ancestors, our ancestors, not denying it and not minimizing it. Next, he's going to talk about how the climate policy is the third pillar of macro policy. The net zero transition is disruptive, but this should be a controlled disruption. A transition that is guided by credible and predictable policies so that the private sector can drive the necessary investments. The more credible and predictable our government climate policies, the more investors will pour in money in anticipation, creating a virtuous cycle of large-scale investment, faster decarbonization, more jobs, and faster growth. Credible climate policy relies on 1, broad political support, 2, clear tracking of progress, and 3, building a track record of measures to achieve intermediate goals. He reiterates the financial disclosure policies developing to help shift towards net zero, but warns finance cannot do the job on its own. Finance is an enabler, a catalyst that will speed the transition, but catalysts still need the underlying components, which in this case are the climate policies of countries. So since the world is on course to exhaust our entire carbon budget in this decade, governments need to invest in the necessary public goods to accelerate the transition towards proven economic zero carbon solutions. So he outlines the most promising areas for investment, which would be home retrofits for energy efficiency, sustainable power by electrifying as much as possible, building charging networks to ease transition to zero emission vehicles, developing hydrogen and carbon capture use and storage, and deep digitization to ensure our electrified economy is managed optimally. A clear strategic vision of the transition to a zero carbon economy could significantly reduce its costs. The more certain private investors can be of the direction of travel, the scale of future investment opportunities, and the legal and contractual framework in which they operate, the lower the expected rate of return they will require to invest. The more certain companies can be about the pace and nature of future technology deployments, the more they will invest in the development of technologies and supply chains, and the faster capital equipment and operating costs will come down as a result of the economy of scale and learning curve effects. That wraps up sustainability. Next, we're going to go into the value of dynamism. Canada's economy has performed well through a series of crises, but the headlines obscure some concerning trends. The primary contributor to growth has been higher employment through greater participation in labor force and higher immigration. This is a strong basis, but we have been less successful in growing the productivity of Canadian workers. The gap with our peers has grown steadily over the past 2 decades. This means Canadians earn less, we are less resilient to shocks, and if it persists, we will leave greater challenges to our children and grandchildren. We need to become more dynamic. He cites Schumpeter, who claimed that capitalism was prone to ossification, becoming rigid and ceasing to further develop, which he warns will happen if public policy is pro-business rather than pro-market, concentrating on the needs of existing firms to the detriment of new entrants into the market. So he outlines several policy priorities that support dynamism. The first, he says, is robust competition policy is essential. In recent decades, competition policy has become largely about defining a market and estimating the impact of mergers or corporate actions on price. In technology, where services are often provided for free, or more precisely, in exchange for advertising and the collection of personal data, a series of acquisitions have been waved through because there is no discernible price impact. But there is an increase in the concentration of economic power, a break on experimentation, and a reduction in dynamism. Canada would do well to heed this cautionary tale. It is a gentle slope towards cozy oligopolies. The costs of this quiet life are not immediately apparent, but they grow with time through lost innovation, stilted ideas, and growing rent-seeking. Eternal vigilance in the name of competition is essential. The future will be made by entrepreneurs we do not yet know. Second policy priority to support dynamism is a solid intellectual property framework. He says many intangibles are highly contested in that they can be easily appropriated and copied. To maintain incentives to invest in intangibles, companies must have a reasonable expectation that they will obtain the benefits of their labors. The third is that the development of a tax system which supports dynamism must be developed so that those who invest their time and money to create new solutions will be rewarded fairly. The fourth is new forms of financing for small and medium-sized businesses. The fifth is successful countries will be centers of excellence and hubs in global supply chains. The sixth is social cohesion is the new competitiveness. A progressive society that truly celebrates diversity and brings its strength to the fore is vital. Social resilience breeds economic resilience, making stakeholder capitalism anchored in truly purpose-driven companies essential. Next, we're going to dive into values-based globalization. For 3 decades following the collapse of the Berlin Wall, the globalization of goods and services deepened the interdependence of countries. Since 1995, foreign trade has increased from around 45% of global GDP to about 70% when COVID struck, and cross-border holdings of financial assets from 75% of global GDP in 1995 to over 200%. He claims that globalization has simultaneously brought great prosperity and caused tremendous misery. Consequently, the principles of international integration are being challenged, and the institutions that underpin it are losing their relevance. The challenge of our time is to determine a new form of inclusive, resilient, and sustainable international integration as globalization enters its 4th phase. What were the first 3 phases, you may ask? So the first phase of globalization was a period leading up to the First World War. Immigration and cross-border capital flows were largely unrestricted, and the gold standard was a convention, and international property rights were enforced by gunboat. The second phase reemerged from the ashes of the Second World War, grounded in a new rules-based architecture for trade, capital, and development. The third phase was the fall of the Berlin Wall, led to the integration of a third of the world's population into the labor force. We're going to continue on talking about values-based globalization in the next part, so stay tuned for that and let me know what you think so far.